Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So glad to see you this morning. I know we're still waiting for a few more folks to show up, but I thought we'd go ahead and get started because there's material to cover and we want to make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A because there always are some good questions and we certainly have the good answers. So I'm looking forward to that part of the meeting. Welcome to Greater Twin Cities United Way. If you have never been in our building before, we're very, very proud of this building. It was donated to us in 1927, so it has been in our ownership since then. And as you can see, it has some history. Just looking around, it's not the most modern of buildings, but we have a great high regard for it. And it has a really wonderful, interesting history. If you're interested in learning more about it, the receptionist at the front desk has a little pamphlet that describes the history and the wonderful philanthropists in the area who donated money and the building to us back in 1927. So welcome. Today is the 24th, yes, of September, second day of fall, and if this is a harbinger of the rest of the season, it looks like we're going to have a great fall. Looking forward to that since summer, sadly, was too short. I'm Marcia Fink. I'm the director of the Basic Needs Impact Area at United Way. We've recently renamed ourselves Stabilizing Families. This is kind of a hallmark meeting. This is the first time ever we've proposed a joint grant-making opportunity with our friends at HungerFree Minnesota, and we're very, very pleased to be able to do that. We know that even though the recession ended supposedly many years ago, the needs of hungry folks and food insecurity in your region and everywhere else across the state and the country have not diminished. The rate of increase perhaps has abated somewhat, but we certainly know that it has increased. So we are very, very pleased to be able to offer this opportunity jointly, and jointly our funds are about $325,000. So glad you're able to join us today. On this, at this meeting, we had 40 RSVP for the on-site meeting, so no doubt we will have some folks filter in. We also have 19 on the webinar, and this webinar will be archived, so if any folks missed it, they'll be able to pick it up later on. So I want to welcome everybody here in this room, and I want to welcome all of the participants on our webinar. Everything that we do today will be recorded so it can be transmitted. Gentlemen in the back, how many do we have on our webinar right now? 18, so we're pretty much at max. So again, I'm Marcia Fink, and I will be going through the role of United Way in this process. David Dayhoff is joining us with HungerFree Minnesota. He is the Director of Partnership Engagement on HungerFree Minnesota, and he will talk about HungerFree. He will also talk about the community close-up information through HungerFree Minnesota. And then Amy Lopez, Community Impact Partnership Manager. Everybody who's in the hunger space in the 9-county area knows Amy very well. So with that, and again, welcome to all of those who are joining us. We'll go through the purpose of the grant. Amy will talk in greater detail about the grant guidelines. Everyone has a copy of the grant guidelines at their table. You also, by the way, have a copy of the PowerPoint, so you can make notes on the PowerPoint. And then the gentleman in the back, Tom Lance and Carrie Steer, are going to go through, they're managing our technology for us, and Tom Lance will take you through the online application. So there's an online application for both sets. So with that, talk a little bit about Stabilizing Families Impact Area at Greater Twin Cities United Way. You don't happen to have this slide in your presentation, but the way that we have partnered on this capacity building grant opportunity is that Greater Twin Cities United Way funds will cover the 9-county metro area. That is our service area, and you can see the map up there. So it's the traditional 7 counties plus Chisago and Isanti. So if your program, if your agency falls within that 7-county area, you would be receiving funds from Greater Twin Cities United Way. Up here also is our mission statement. We unite caring people to build pathways out of poverty, thereby creating opportunities for all. So when everyone does better, everyone does better. That's kind of our philosophy here. Greater Twin Cities United Way supports 322 programs at 175 nonprofits across the 9-county area. We generated $88 million in our campaign in 2012. We are the 2nd largest United Way in the country, and it's to the credit of the state of Minnesota, its generous philanthropic tradition, and the presence of so many Fortune 500 company headquarters that we're able to benefit. We all benefit from them. So in the hunger space, which is one of the 10 focus areas of the work that we do at United Way, we are intent on providing food for 165,000 people annually through 2015. And of course, we don't do that, United Way. We provide resources for all of our partners that actually do the work. We invest $4 million annually in hunger relief programs, which consists of food shelves, food banks, and meal programs. And we're very proud of the partnerships, and many of you are here, and the work of our partners. Again, without that work, we would not be able to accomplish these goals. We are also intent on looking for system-level efficiencies across the system because we fund so many hunger relief partners. We have the ability to take a look at what are common threads, what are some ways that we can produce greater efficiencies, and have implemented a lot of that along the way. Another big emphasis that we're supporting is federal nutrition programs. So SNAP outreach particularly has been a real focus of the investments and the partnerships that we have formed. So one of the things that we've done at Greater Twin Cities United Way is been a catalyst for pulling all of these organizations that you see together into a collaborative called the Twin Cities Hunger Initiative. And it's through the collaborative work with all of these organizations and many others who've participated that we've been able to look at some system-level efficiencies and increase the amount of food in the system and also increase the participation in food stamps, food support outreach. So in the past 4 years, we've increased the food in the system by about 30 million pounds. That's with a collaborative of all these folks working together. And increase the utilization of SNAP for those eligible by about 50%. So it's been a really big increase, very intentional. It's the value of pulling everybody together in a collaborative. Any questions on any of that? Great. I am now happy to turn it over to David, who will talk about HungerFree Minnesota and the community close-up data that's being used with this capacity building grant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Am I on, Mike? All right, thank you. So in the room, you probably wouldn't need it, but since we've got people on the web, we'll make sure that I stay mic'd up here. So I'm David Dayhoff from HungerFree Minnesota. I've met many of you in the room. So the good news is that a lot of you have heard this story before, but I see some faces I don't recognize. So really quickly to talk a little bit more about HungerFree Minnesota. HungerFree Minnesota is a coalition organization. It was formed back in 2011 with the goal of saying at the bottom of closing Minnesota's 100 million missing meal gap. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But the original sort of core community partners that came together to form HungerFree Minnesota are the 6 Feeding America food banks that cover the whole state of Minnesota, as well as United Way and Hunger Solutions. It's a 3-year campaign. So HungerFree Minnesota is not a new 501c3 organization that will be around in perpetuity. Instead, there was some work done that put together a plan to try and quantify what does hunger really look like in the whole state of Minnesota. You know, if we talk a lot about fighting hunger, but what would it really mean to end hunger? You know, if we talk about is it actually possible to dimensionalize that? And we were able to put some work together in partnership with the Boston Consulting Group's Minneapolis office that used some methodology to identify the missing meal gap, and realizing that for 100 million meals, it seems like a really daunting number. But in fact, it's theoretically possible to close that number. If we all work together, we do a combination of things around both food bank, food shelf meal program, as well as programs like SNAP and school meals and other things, that it's possible to come up with 100 million meals. And so that's why HungerFree Minnesota exists and came together as this campaign organization to make that happen. So within the initiatives that HungerFree Minnesota has, one is called Community Close-Up, and I want to talk a moment about that. So Community Close-Up, we looked at, as I mentioned before, a variety of different things that could be done around the state of Minnesota to come up with more meals and close Minnesota's meal gap. And some of those things can be done on a statewide basis. So, you know, we worked with the, for a SNAP marketing campaign, for instance, some of you may be familiar with, that Hunger Solutions is carrying forward very well. We're also looking at, we've got a school breakfast challenge, an after-school meal program, a few other things that are done on a statewide basis. But the other thing that we realized as we embarked upon HungerFree Minnesota is that, in fact, to get it done right, we needed to work with at the community level in a lot of cases to build capacity locally, so that, you know, after this campaign ends, sustainably going forward, there's still in communities all across the state new innovation, new collaboration, new capacity to carry forward this work in perpetuity. And so that's why we created this initiative called Community Close-Up. So one of the things that we have is this missing meal data, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but it was a way to look at if Minnesota misses 100 million meals, where are those meals missed at a much more concrete level? If we could go down to the community or even the neighborhood level, it gives us an idea to where we can really target our focus and try and close that meal gap. And then what we want to do is support local organizations like the people in this room, or following along online, to come up with priorities in their area and fund programs to close that gap locally. And so that's what the Community Close-Up Initiative is about. So let me talk a little bit more about the meal gap. The Boston Consulting Group has been a great partner of HungerFree Minnesota, and they did some analysis based upon something that Feeding America had done several years ago, and many people are familiar with this, that they've mapped the meal gap by county across the United States. They basically followed up on some research that was done by USDA that quantifies what food insecure people look like. And maybe many of you are familiar with that term about food insecurity. There was actually a story in the news sometime in the last month or two. They had updated that story or that study, and it got some coverage even in the local press and in the national press about what food insecurity looks like. And so to make that happen, USDA goes out and does ongoing research about, a systematic statistical questionnaire of, in the past period of time, have you ever skipped meals, had trouble buying enough food, had to eat less than you would? There's a standardized list of questions they do over and over again. And that puts together a profile of what a food insecure household looks like in the United States. Well, what the analysis that Boston Consulting Group adapted from Feeding America does is, okay, you give me the statistics, the demographic data about a set of people, and they created a statistical model that can predict how many of those people are food insecure. So by far the most important pieces of the model are unemployment and poverty level, but then you add to it a little bit based upon race and ethnicity and family composition, and you put all those numbers together in the mix and turn the crank, and the model spits out, okay, in this set of people, X% of them are probably food insecure. And from that, we can extrapolate, okay, well, how many meals are then missed? So we did that based upon the updated 2010 census data in the state of Minnesota. And what that model revealed is that in 2010, across the entire state of Minnesota, Minnesotans missed a little over 100 million meals. And so that's sort of the basis of forming HungerFree Minnesota, to try to target that missing meal gap. The other thing, though, that we want to do is say, okay, we can look at the statistics around the state and how many people and where are actually food insecure and how many meals are being missed. But can we also say something about the available supply of resources in those areas? So, the utilization of where SNAP dollars are, where food shelf pounds are being handed out, where free and reduced price school meals are provided, et cetera. And that way we can put together some analysis that shows, hey, across the state, where are Minnesota's biggest missing meal gaps? And then where are the highest priorities that we could try and make some investments to address those locally? And so that's really the, I use the term dashboard on this slide, but many of you have seen the analysis, and I'll go ahead and show you this slide that some of you have seen. This is the state of Minnesota by census tract. And so census tracts typically are supposed to contain about 4,000 people. So in the metro area, they can be really small, and outstate they can be really big, and they can even be really big and not have 4,000 people in them. But this gives you an idea, based upon the 2010 data, of all of Minnesota's 1,332 census tracts rank according to the top 20% or bottom 20% for food insecurity and missing meals. And the reason that's important for this meeting this morning, as well as this effort with United Way for this granting program around community close-up, is that one of the things that we are trying to do with these grant programs is to get people to think about the meal gap they're trying to solve. So I said a while ago that what versus fighting hunger, what would ending hunger look like? How many meals would really be needed to close the gap in a particular community? And that can be geographic. It can be all of Otter Tail County. But it can also be something demographic. It can be, I want seniors in North Minneapolis, for instance. So it doesn't matter which combination of those things, but that's the kind of thing that we're looking for in this particular granting proposal. So what is the meal gap you're trying to address? Is it based upon a geographic area? Is it based upon a particular demographic group? Doesn't matter, but just think about, okay, we can establish a goal for how many meals we want to provide, how many different clients we need to reach, and then what kind of impact will our particular program have. And so that's why this community close-up initiative is really predicated upon this kind of analysis, where we're trying to think about closing the meal gap. So if people have other questions about this, I'll be happy to take them at the end. We do have a lot of material to cover, but assuming that Amy and I and Tom do it in a reasonably accelerated fashion, we should have enough time for questions. I'll be happy to take more questions about this particular topic too. So let's see. I'm handing it over now. So Amy.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, we're on. Hello, everybody. I'm going to be talking about the grant guidelines. So if I can direct your attention to the copy that says Capacity Building of the Emergency Food System 1-Year Grant Request for Proposal. This is the document that you're going to want to make reference to if you choose to apply for this grant. This is where all the information is in terms of funding criteria, timeline, data requirements, and such. So I'm just going to walk you through. On the slide here, we start with geographic reach. And so what we want to say about this is this grant opportunity is for nonprofit organizations within the state of Minnesota. And Greater Twin Cities United Way will be reviewing the grants within the 9-county area. And HungerFree Minnesota will be reviewing grants within Greater Minnesota. So just keep that in mind. In terms of the types of grants that we're going to be offering, we have 2 types. And for those that have applied for HungerFree Minnesota grants before, this should be familiar to you, or if you've looked at their grant opportunities. There's going to be the planning grant opportunity and the implementation grant. And I'm on page 1. And so just to kind of clarify what the distinction is between the 2, the planning grant, we're basically looking at you're wanting to serve 1 or more client populations, and this would be the same with the implementation proposal. But the distinctions here is that you're basically developing a project concept that requires additional development. And this particular grant opportunity, you can request up to $5,000. We're also looking at specific projects that reduce the missing meal gap in a geographic area or service area, as well as collaborate with other organizations, which is defined in the glossary in the back of your grant guidelines document. And how that distinguishes between the implementation proposals is that we're still looking at focused on one or more client populations, but we're really looking at focusing on big picture solutions for the missing meal gap that is not only improving your service delivery model, but is also collaborating with one or more organizations. So it's more of that implementation of an initiative or a project that is involved in the implementation grant, okay? So two types, and then the implementation grant, you can apply for up to $50,000. And then we have eligibility. So you may be wondering who's actually eligible to apply for this grant. So basically, we're looking for nonprofit organizations. It can be a hunger relief organization or a non-hunger relief organization. We're on page 2 now. And we're basically looking for 501c3 status that you'll be able to document and send. We're looking for applicants that have been awarded previously for HungerFree Minnesota. If you've already been awarded a grant from HungerFree, specifically a planning grant and or an implementation grant, but let me just start with the planning grant. You can apply for an implementation grant if you've already received or been awarded a planning grant. If you've received an implementation grant and you want to submit a new project, a brand new project for implementation, please know that you're welcome to do so. However, the priorities right now for this grant opportunity will be to focus on specific geographic regions within the state of Minnesota that have the highest missing meal gaps. And we have basically identified, David and I have identified specific counties within the state of Minnesota that have the highest missing meal gap. So you're welcome to apply for an implementation grant if you've already received a grant for a new, you can apply for a new project, but just know that our priority is going to be really targeting specific geographic areas that have the highest missing meal gap. Okay, and then we're looking for organizations that are serving families and individuals at or below 200% of poverty. Also, one way to say that is a family of 4 earning $46,100. And if you are a food shelf or a meal program, we ask that you are either a Second Harvest Food Bank or a local food bank member like Emergency Food Shelf Network or another Second Harvest member, and you follow compliance with their regulations. And then in this grant opportunity, we are going to be asking, which is a little bit different from different from other HungerFree grants. This is a kind of a way that both HungerFree and United Way had come together, is that we are going to ask you, if you're not already doing this already, to provide screening to clients to see if they're eligible for federal programs. And specifically, we support using Bridge to Benefits. If you have other screening tools that you're using, like AARP or DHS's screening tool, you're welcome to use that as well. But that will be a requirement, and you'll see that in the data collection. That will be one of the outputs that you'll be required to collect data on in terms of households screened. We also ask that you join the movement of HungerFree Minnesota, and that's very easy to do. It's just a matter of going on the website link that's provided in the grant guidelines and joining the movement. And I think a lot of you have already done that. And then that you have aligned strategies with HungerFree Minnesota's action plan. And you can learn more about HungerFree by the website itself provided, www.hungerfreeminnesota or mn.org. Excuse me. So you'll be able to learn more about the movement if you haven't learned at this point. So funding criteria is basically who is eligible to apply and what are the kind of the basic requirements. Core expectations, which is on the same page, bottom of page 2 and turning to page 3. What we're virtually looking at here is kind of, it ties into the purpose of the grant, but it's also what we're really looking for in terms of the type of proposals that are going to be submitted. So we're looking for projects that are specifically going to be increasing the number of meals and or pounds distributed and or individuals served. So you're either distributing more food or you're serving more people, or you could be doing both. We're also looking for proposals that create new or expanded anti-hunger programs. So you could be basically developing a new initiative. You could be or fostering basically an existing program with a new service area or such. So we're looking for innovation. We're looking for expansion of an existing program, or we're looking at a brand new initiative that you're looking at for, developing a new partnership, for instance. And then, speaking of partnerships, building existing collaborations on the plan. So looking at, for instance, you are partnering with, like, for instance, a job training program, or you're partnering with a corporation on getting more food distributed, or you're partnering with a farmer's market, or something where you're partnering with an existing collaboration or partner, or you're developing a new partnership. So we're looking at expansion of a partnership and or a new partnership. So just think collaboration is going to be a major key to this particular grant opportunity. Okay, and then on the top of page 3, we have 3 other requirements, which is basically about reporting. And we have HungerFree Minnesota has hired Dr. Stacy Stockdale, to do the evaluation of all of their capacity building, well, all of their HungerFree Minnesota, evaluating their projects. And so as you're approached, if you are a recipient of this grant, Stacy will be contacting you and approaching you for various data collection asks, if you will, throughout the grant period. And then if there's any additional communication that HungerFree Minnesota needs, if there's a need for additional information from the grantees, then please just provide whatever information they're asking for. So it's just kind of basic, very basic communication that they need for HungerFree Minnesota. And then on the middle of page 3, there's basically, we're providing definitions, if you will, or it's more criteria in how we're defining meal gap, service level, capacity needs, collaboration, innovation, and sustainability. One thing I do want to say about sustainability is that we will be looking at projects and asking the question, how do you plan on sustaining your efforts, your increased efforts in terms of capacity building? So I would encourage you to be thoughtful in terms of when you're writing your proposals, how do you plan on using the money, and how do you plan on sustaining those efforts past the grant period? That's something that we both certainly look at, that we look through that lens in terms of, as we're going to be reviewing the grants, in terms of sustainability. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. And that was a lot of information in terms of the grant guidelines. There's still data collection requirements, which is pretty, let me just go through that first, and then I'll ask if you guys have questions. And if you could turn to page 3 or 4, actually 4, the data requirements are pretty basic. What we're going to ask you to do is to collect additional pounds of food distributed, and how that's measured is basically, you basically take the grant, so United Way is going to be requiring a mid-year report and a final report. And HungerFree Minnesota will be requiring, I believe, quarterly reports.
On the data.
Yeah, on the data specifically. So, and you'll learn more about that within the funding letters. But what I want to say is that when you're collecting additional pounds of food, like within 6 months of the grant period, the first half of the grant period, you're basically tracking how many pounds of food additional that were distributed, and you can compare it to the same time period of the previous year. So you can see what the additional pounds of food is. So you basically track total pounds of food distributed December 1st through May, and then you compare that same time period from the previous year to be able to get the additional pounds of food. Okay. We're also asking for additional meals distributed. And because United Way tracks pounds of food and HungerFree tracks meals, so we're asking for both. And then additional individuals served, as well as the number of households screened for federal programs. So those are pretty basic. Now I know that with previous HungerFree Minnesota grants, there has been an option to report outcome indicators or other outputs or indicators that you've been wanting to track. So we're leaving it open to you. If you're wanting to identify your own optional outputs or outcomes, you can do that. But just know that the top 4 that I just laid out are required to track. And then if there's any additional outputs or outcome indicators that you want to track, then feel free to submit that in the proposal itself. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to pause, and this is the meat of, why you're here. So I just want to make sure that if anybody has any questions at this time, we can entertain that. Just brief questions. Okay, now I'm going to walk to you so that our webinar viewers will actually hear your question. Hi. So my question is on the required outputs. So for a food shelf where we normally track pounds of food distributed, are you saying that we need to have an equivalent measure for meals distributed through those pounds of food, or I'm not understanding that part? Okay, so there is a formula that you can use that basically where you're able to actually I think it's 1.83.
It's really simple. It's
very simple.
It's based on Feeding America uses a rule of thumb of 1.2 pounds per meal. 1.2. So all it is if you're taking care of pounds, you'll just divide by 1.2. It's just a way for us. You may be handing out pounds of food, and someone else is serving meals, and someone else is enrolling people in SNAP, and we're just trying to aggregate in total. So we use something like that as a meal equivalent for everything we measure. That's all.
Simple translation. That's all it is. Okay, and I saw a question over here.
Hi, you said you were going to focus on specific geographic areas. What are those areas?
David, you want to touch on that?
Right. So we've got, without off the top of my head going through the exhaustive list, we have a combination of that map that I showed before about where the largest meal gaps are, and then also where we've made investments so far. So again, we'll consider an application from anywhere, but definitely Ramsey County and St. Paul area is one. There are parts of Hennepin County as well, some in Scott County, parts of Washington County, the St. Cloud area, the Iron Range. There's certain areas in northwest Minnesota as well. Winona and some down in extreme southeastern Minnesota, Mankato area. I'm leading a couple out that are in the metro. Anoka County for sure. And Amy and I, we've gone through a list. And again, it doesn't, I don't want people to get too hung up like, oh, rats, I don't serve St. Paul, so I shouldn't apply. But just know that we are going to prioritize based upon what comes in on those areas. Yes, go ahead. Do you need the mic again? Who do we have? Oh, I turned this guy on.
So 2 follow-up questions.
Yes.
One, where do we find that information? I assume there's a map or something somewhere. And secondly, how do homeless folks figure into this? Because there's going to be homeless people in all of those areas, and of course they're missing meals.
Right. Yeah. So we have just the map overall. I don't have that list specifically of the ones that we're targeting this time out on the website. It probably will be. Perhaps we can put it in with one of the.
Yeah, we'll put it in the. We'll put a list.
Materials we archive from.
Yeah, we'll put a list in the archives and make sure it's on the HungerFree website, just so that we have it.
But again, the when it comes to homeless populations, it's more. As I mentioned, that we do have a geographic focus to this, but also, by the way, for anybody, if it's relevant, we'll entertain things that are regional in scope too. It doesn't have to be just if somebody has a program that covers a larger area or something, then that's fine as well. But that's okay. I mean, if you're focused on where is the main thing is to focus on defining for us, here's the client population that I'm trying to reach. So not so much about the address of the people per se, especially if they're homeless, but rather, I'm trying to target homeless people that are on, I don't know, the east side of St. Paul or something. Okay, just so we kind of know roughly speaking what your area is. And again, I don't feel in mind just that if your program, some or all of your service area doesn't happen to cover something that I just mentioned, still, by all means, please apply. I mean, hungry people are hungry people, regardless of where they are. Just if this happens like it happened the last couple times, we're going to get requests for way more dollars than I actually have to distribute. And so one, but not the only, one of the ways that we're going to sort those is by the places that have these highest meal gaps and where we haven't had investments so far.
Yes, my question is about a planning grant. While we're engaged in the process of planning, well, I guess So the outcomes for that would be different, I would imagine, than the implementation
Correct.
grant?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. Basically, the main thing for the planning grant is sort of produce a plan. You know, what's the action plan? All right, we've put our heads together and we're going to do this. That's the main thing. Dimensionalizing it roughly will be helpful, but it's not required to come up with a list like that.
Okay, so in terms of the budget, because ironically we're already engaged in a planning process, and so far costs have revolved around staff time and travel time to meetings and things like that. So would that be the type of items that will go into the budget?
Yes, absolutely. That's should I go ahead and do that examples page?
Sure, go ahead.
I mean, this you know, and this is one thing, like you said, if you have something going on and as we speak, and you would want to end up using some of the grant funds retroactively to pay for something, that's possible. I mean, we just want you to spell out sort of this is sort of the budget of what we've done. But on the screen in front of you, you know, basically we've talked about two paths. One, I'll start with the planning grant side of it first. So if you've got, you know, maybe you either want to get a new collaborative group together, or maybe you already have some ideas. It's just a question of sorting between them. You know, of these different ideas, which one should we do? That's the kind of situation that you might be a good candidate for a planning grant. You know, we haven't quite yet decided what we want to do. And so some examples of what we've done in past rounds here, just for people to see, we funded a sort of facilitated countywide planning workshop, bringing a bunch of people together from different organizations, some of whom didn't even know each other very well, to kind of put together in a given county and say, hey, what kind of projects could we do, whether it's individually or as a group in this county. And so the main expenses incurred in that can be staff time, there's a little bit of meeting expense, there can be travel expenses related to that, those sorts of things. I mean, in the end, we just know that there is a cost to doing that, you know, people's time, and a little bit of a dollar cost as well, and we don't want that to be a barrier from people coming together to do this, so that's one of the purposes of having these implementation grants. Another example is you know, an organization trying to decide about possibly relocating their place and wanting to know what's the best place to do that. And so needing some data together, both the data that we could provide from HungerFree Minnesota, but also data of their own or data that they wanted to get from other sources, and spend some time deciding, you know, should we stay where we are or should we move to somewhere else? That's another planning type example. And then finally, a capacity or capabilities assessment of regional food shelves. So looking at meal programs. So one of our grantees was looking at the food bank in the Iron Range, in the Arrowhead region, and looking at, you know, we're just trying to do an assessment of all the different programs that are in the area to help kind of understand better, you know, who's out there and which ones could we partner with more deeply. So that's another example of a planning grant type proposal. Those are illustrative. I mean, you all might have other ideas, but that would give you an idea of some successful planning grant proposals. On the implementation grant side, you know, I mentioned before, when we think about capacity building, and both in HungerFree's original strategy and also with United Way, there is a traditional kind of capacity building that tends to be around physical capacity to do stuff. You know, we need equipment to handle pounds of things, and that is certainly eligible. But we don't want to restrict it to those kinds of things as well. There's other kinds of capacity that are equally, in some cases, maybe more important. And so to give you an example of things we've funded, we've talked about a new mobile pantry program with some additional local partners, perishable food handling equipment because they want to be able to source more perishables through a food shelf, a new summer feeding program with kid packs to send home. We funded that. A multilingual outreach campaign, you know, that's a different form of capacity, but needing somebody who can more address a specific ethnic population on a targeted outreach basis. That's another example. A marketing campaign to complement agency expansion. So an agency doing an expansion of their own, but the other thing is that you have to find the people, right, that are unaware of your program. And so, in fact, investments in that kind of marketing and outreach can be critical in addition to physical type investments. So that's another example. And then finally, you know, even one agency they just wanted to do, just to improve their screening. So for a couple iPads that their trained volunteers could use with people on intake that run them through the Richard benefits process. So think about capacity very broadly, but those are examples of implementation kind of projects that we've done as well. So.
Thanks. I just have, going back to that question about the reporting then on the planning grants. So is it assumed that those, you know, the additional pounds of food and the additional meals would just stay flat during that planning grant time, or would you like us to have a goal for what might happen in the future?
No. No, yeah, we would assume the planning grant, we're not going to assume there's going to be growth. The idea is, now if there is something that happens as part of that process, fantastic. I mean, if you could capture that in your reporting that, we discovered that these 3 organizations that we could refer back and forth to each other, something, that would be fantastic if it happens, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, we will have time for Q&A after the online application training is offered, so if we could hold off on questions for a little bit. And then I'd like to come and ask Tom Lance, who is in our Information Services Department at Greater Twin Cities United Way, and he's going to be covering how to actually access the online application, and he's going to provide a demo as well.
Yeah, we're good? Okay. Well, thank you. My name is Tom Lanz. I'm with Greater Twin Cities United Way in our IT department. We're going to run through just the basics of how to complete the online application, how to get your information submitted. All right, real high-level overview of the steps you're going to go through. First off, is there anyone here who's with a currently funded United Way agency who's gone through either an application or a report on our new system? Okay, a few, and they came back. It's possible. You can do it. All right, real high level. First step, you're going to need to prepare to log in. So you want to gather your team, decide who all needs to work on your application. It could be just one of you. There could be 2 or 3. In the system, you will have one application that multiple people can access if you need to. I'll talk more about that. But determine who's going to need to access that. And then get them access. We have a sign-up page I'll point you to here later in the presentation where you'll go in, request access. We'll set it up. Sometimes that takes an hour. Sometimes it takes a day or so, depending upon how busy we are. So get your access, log in. One person, one time in your organization is going to start a new application. You're going to plug all your information in there. You're going to submit the application. Should be pretty straightforward. All right. If you're into the technical specs, the best browsers to use our system are going to be a newer version of Internet Explorer. Firefox works pretty well. We use Chrome and Safari occasionally as well, but Internet Explorer is going to be the best. So if you run into some troubles, make sure you've got a newer version of Internet Explorer. All right. If you already have access to the system, either by having gone through a reporting process before or gone through an application, or if you pick up agency designation reports from us as well, you can use that username and password. That's just generally to the system. You can log in and view the application that way. If you need a new username or password, this link right here, gtcuw.org, our impact for nonprofits funding, current funding opportunities. And actually, I think I've got that up here. Okay. On our website, again, under the For Nonprofits Current Funding Opportunities, by the end of the day, we'll have this updated with the link also to that funding opportunity. But it's got the details here on how to apply, and just a little bit down the page, request a new user account. Let us know name, organization that you need access to, which would be your organization. The details so that we make sure we are tying you to the right organization. And then submit that. Like I said, we'll get that set for you. You'll get an email from the system automatically. Once you get that email, maybe give it 10 or 15 minutes to make sure all of your permissions are set up. Some people get that email, they're excited, they log in right away, and it's not quite ready to go. So a lot of excitement. All right, so let's see. All right, so you've got your password there. Look for a confirmation email from that support@gtcuw.org. This would also, if you lose your password and you need it reset, there's an automated way to do that on the login page. You'll get an email from that same address. All right, Amy and her team are going to distribute some information on this grant. We will get you the link directly to the funding proposal page. Once you have an application, you can go to grantsproposal.gtcuw.org. You'll see anything that your organization has submitted on that system before, so past reports, past applications. But if you haven't set up a new application for this grant yet, you'll need that link right to the funding page, either from our website, from HungerFree's website, or from that information that Amy's team is going to distribute. So you'll link up to the funding proposal page, enter your email address, that password that you're going to receive, then you'll get logged in, and we're going to take a quick walk through on what you do from there.
For a second,
Please do.
I just wanted to interject. Tom had mentioned that so there'll be a link on the HungerFree website, an announcement for this grant, to also be an announcement on the Greater Twin Cities United Way website. And then I'm going to send an email out to all of you who have attended today, along with the webinar participants, and send you a direct link so you don't have to kind of figure out where to find the application on our online system. So you'll receive a direct link to the actual application. Okay?
And one other thing while we've interrupted Tom, that just to may go without saying, but even if your organization is not in the 9-county metro area of Twin Cities United Way, we're just going to put all applications through this site.
Yeah.
And then we'll divide them so the ones that are either they're outside of the 9-county metro or cover regional or something broader in scope, we'll pass those over to HungerFree. So regardless of whether you're in the 9-county metro or not, you're going to use this site to apply.
Perfect. All right, so here is you'll see that it's grantproposal.unitedwaytwincities.org, but then at the end there's a whole bunch more that's pointing us right to this particular grant site. And I've entered in my username and password there. Employee login, you don't need to worry about. That's for internal employees. You can use the forgot password if you have an account currently and you just need a reset on that password. All right. See if I got my username and password right. Okay. So once we've logged in, you should see the Basic Needs Hunger Capacity Building Emergency Food Shelf Grant page here with some details. I don't know if we'll have any announcements, but there's a section for that there. Once your organization, so I have started a test application here. Once you've started an application, anyone in your organization who logs into this page should see that same application there. And you're going to work out of the same one. They can click in, open it, make changes, save it. Someone else can make changes until you're ready to submit it. The first time you come in, that's going to be empty. You won't have an application yet. You will need to start a new application. So again, one person, one time is going to start a new application. First thing I recommend that you do is give your application a name, and just for our sort of organization, on the back end we see all of these in together. So if you put the name as agency name dash program title, or even just agency name, that helps us keep straight what application is for whom. Some people go in there and they put application 1, and it takes us some time to figure out who that's for. So I'm going to call this one Tom's Test Organization. Also, after we've given it a name, the very first thing I would do is just go ahead and save it. Make sure that everything is working. Make sure that your account can save to that. Make sure that there is an application out there so that if someone else in your organization came in, they would see that, okay, one started, we don't need to start another one. For anyone who's gone into the system before, we did get some comments that you didn't used to get this page confirming that it's saved. We added this in so you know that big bold letters, your application has been saved. All right, our application is out there. Now I can go through. The application itself be pretty straightforward. We're just going to go straight down, fill in all of the boxes. We do encourage you to save as you go along. We wouldn't want you to get all of your information in there, have your computer freeze, have your web connection drop, and lose your application. So we have save buttons all the way throughout the application. Use them regularly. A couple comments on just sort of through the form. We do recommend you use either a scroll wheel or you kind of scroll off on the right. We've had people use their arrow keys to navigate through, and if you've selected something here and then you try and page down, people change those answers maybe without knowing it. So we recommend you use the scroll, or the scroll bars on the right. What other tips? If you want to use this as a guide but actually gather your information and write your answers up in Microsoft Word or some other word processing program, that works. You can certainly do that, copy and paste your information in here. The only thing I would let you know is that it's not going to keep any kind of fancy formatting. So if you've got bolding, underlines, bullet points, all that, it's just going to paste flat text in here. So if you want to just draft your text out there to have it in a separate format that's offline on your desktop, feel free to do that. The other big thing I would caution you here, I've mentioned that multiple people can work in the report. There's the danger with that of being able to overwrite people's changes. So if 2 of us open up the report at the same time, I complete the whole application, fill everything in, save it. Then Jim comes back later and adds, he just writes 1 field in there into the blank report or the blank application and then saves his copy. It's going to overwrite everything that I have. So it's going to look exactly like the last saved version of the application. So if you're going to have multiple people in there, I would have a plan for who's going to work when, or maybe just funnel all of your answers through one person if that works better. So. And then along with that, when you're not working in the report actively, I would just close. I'd save it, close out so that someone else can come in and work if that's what you're going to do. Amy, did you have any comments on the form itself or any questions, anything that you wanted to point out to people?
Sorry. The annual, so this online application will be asking you a series of questions. If you keep scrolling down, Tom, under project information, we'll be asking you for questions related to how do you plan on using the money. Specifically, what is your plan if it's a planning grant or implementation grant, and then specific questions around collaboration and how do you plan on sustaining the grant past the 1-year grant period.
Okay. I guess the one other thing I would add, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Amy, as well, if you've got multiple organizations putting together for a single project, somebody is going to end up being the person that submits this. Just somewhere in there, you're going to put the names of the other people that are involved as well. Okay.
Okay. So in the narrative section, there's a budget section here as well. This is going to do the math and total things up for you. There's an expenses section as well that will do that. Required output measures. And then down at the bottom, I'll point out, yeah.
Tom, I'm sorry to interject. For the program budget, just make sure you're clear that the program budget is just strictly for the grant period starting December 1st, 2013 through November 30th, 2014. It's not a calendar year program budget. It's a grant period program budget.
Great. And then with the required output measures, so they have 4 of them that are defined, and then there are 3 additional optional that people can provide as they. So you'll list here what your indicator is, your amount, and then the evaluation method. And we do have service delivery locations. If you have multiple service delivery locations, key one in, provide all their information, and then down at the bottom here, there's 2 add space for additional addresses. Click that, it'll bring up another form, and you can enter in multiple service delivery locations. Questions on the form itself? Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let me just I'll go to Brian because I saw his hand up.
I just want to confirm that you're using the same template for planning and implementation, right? Yes. Okay.
Yes. Same template.
Yeah, there'll be an option for you to click a scroll or what do you call those? The drop-down menu, whether you're applying for a planning grant or an implementation grant. And we'll make it more clear in the grant guidelines that the outputs are really only required for the implementation grant, and it's really optional if you want to project your targets for planning grants. It's really going to be optional. Okay, Brian?
One more question. Can we submit more than one planning grant?
Well, what we're saying is that so the priority is going to be, again, we're really trying to target geographic areas that have the highest missing middle gaps. If you do choose to submit 2 planning grants, they have to be for 2 separate projects. And just know that it's going to be a highly competitive process, so you're welcome to submit it. But just keep in mind kind of our key priorities in terms of what we're trying to focus on. Did you want to add anything, David?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That if they need to be 2 totally separate things, that's great. And the other thing is that don't be surprised if you do that, we may have to ask you, if you only had one, which one do you want to have, kind of thing. So, there's a question online?
Yeah, I'll take the question on the webinar. Any other questions in the audience about the online application? The past couple times in which I've submitted a United Way application using this technology, when I go to try to print a copy of everything I've written, it's only showing what's in a certain field. It doesn't extend past that field. Have you guys fixed that yet?
It's a Microsoft issue, so if anyone has any good contacts in Redmond, Washington who can fix that for us, we'll gladly. There is a print preview that will give you a better formatted page for print. What we found, though, is when boxes, if you give a response that extends past one page, like the entire response is more than one page, it does cut off at the bottom. If you run into that and you need a printed copy, shoot us an email at the help desk. We can help you out with it. But yeah, our two answers would be, you know, brevity and ask us for help.
But you're seeing the whole thing, correct?
We see the whole thing, absolutely. We review them through the online form. The data is all there. It's just a matter of transitioning it over to a printed document, and it cuts it off at the end of the page. Yeah, there's just not a good fix for it. Okay.
Online?
Okay, I actually answered the question online. I asked a clarifying question. So now we're going to just open it to general questions.
I did have a few more. Just
I'm so sorry, Tom.
Yep,
I
no
didn't
worries.
mean to cut you
no
off.
worries.
Okay.
All right. So that's the form itself. We've talked about tips as far as saving as you go, copying and paste from Word, scroll bar, and then not having multiple people submitting at the same time. Just to stress again, and if you weren't clear on what I meant by multiple people submitting at the same time, if Susan opens the application and starts editing a blank copy, and Carl opens the application a couple minutes later, Susan's going to save her changes. When Carl saves his version, it's still from that initial blank one, so only the information that he saved is going to overwrite Susan. So that was the one thing we ran into that gets a little disappointing when you put a lot of work in. So make sure your team knows if multiple people are going to be working at the same time. All right, so once all of your fields are filled in, you've done your initial reviews, your executive director approves of what you're going to submit. In addition to resaving the document, hit submit. After you submit your application, you will not be able to make any more edits. It pushes it over into our back-end system. We get notified that it's submitted. We can move them back into draft mode so you can make changes, but I would definitely make sure that you've got everything in there before you submit that application. On your agency dashboard, you should be able to see that it says submitted. You should see the application still out there, but at that point it's kind of in our hands. And then just resources if you run into trouble. Again, the Greater Twin Cities United Way and the HungerFree Minnesota websites will have the link to that RFP site. This webinar is going to be recorded and will be available to you if you have other questions, as well as the PowerPoint presentation that we're going through here. We do staff a help desk with the number of people here, support@gtcuw.org, or we have got the phone number there. If you run into questions, trouble finding the website, submitting, something weird happens and it doesn't let you save your reports, you need a printed copy that extends past one page, feel free to get in touch with us and we're happy to help you out. That's me.
Okay, any other questions for Tom about the online application? Okay, I just want to, before we move into FAQs, I just want to kind of remind you, if you refer to the grant guidelines on page 2, top of page 2, I just want to go over the timeline for this grant. So by the end of today, and potentially earlier, we'll have the grant released available online. So you'll see, and you'll basically see a link. You'll basically see the announcement on HungerFree's website, Greater Twin Cities United Way's website. You'll be receiving an email from me directly to all participants of this webinar as well as this meeting face-to-face, sending you a link, a direct link to the application. And so that will all be done today. And then you'll have until October 25th, end of day, to submit the online application. And then you'll hear back from us the week of November 18th of whether you're going to be awarded the grant or not. And then funding will start December 1st. Okay, so again, funding in the 9-county area will be coming from United Way. Funding in Greater Minnesota will be coming from HungerFree. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then we have this FAQ kind of questions that you may be asking yourself, and hopefully can provide clarity. I'm going to pass it over to David for that.
Yeah, just before, we'll just take open questions after this, but these are a few that we've gotten before or are getting already, so just so people know. Amy alluded to this some before, but if you've already received a grant from us, are you eligible for this round? The answer is yes. You can go ahead and apply again. As I mentioned, however, we're going to be prioritizing new initiatives as well, so just know that. If you've already received a planning grant from us, by all means apply for an implementation grant, for sure. Now that is absolutely a priority for us if we can fund plans that have already been put together. Having said this as a clarifier, and I looking around this room, I see many people in this room who've received grants already. It doesn't mean you can't, just because, Brian or Liz got a grant before doesn't mean, don't avoid them now. If you want to include them as part of your coalition or something, by all means, that's great. So I just know that if your organization already received one and you ask for another one that's just about your organization, it's going to be a competitive process, and we'll have to take that into consideration. The other thing that I think this came in online, and I've heard this before, not here, but you don't have to do planning then implementation. So if you haven't received the planning grant already, that's okay, and you've got something that's an implementation idea, apply straight away. That's all right. They don't have to be sequential. It's more about what the needs of your particular situation are. How you learn about the missing meal gap in your service area. So you contact HungerFree Minnesota. We don't require, as part of one of the implementation grants, that you have specified in there, okay, in this part of Dakota County that I'm targeting, there are X many thousand food insecure households with this many meals. That's nice. I mean, it's possible that we can get that information, but you don't have to have that. But if you do want to know more about, hey, I saw that map, I know you had this missing meals data, can you tell me about the missing meals data in this county or this area, then we can provide that to you. It may take us a few days to do that, though, so that's not helpful if it's right before the deadline, but the earlier you can tell us, the better. And then if you've got a concept and you want to, yeah, we're absolutely open to having a discussion of your particular idea. If we can help you think about putting it in the terms of what is your meal gap, or are there other programs like this, or those kinds of things. So don't hesitate to contact us. I know for me, email definitely is the preferred way to do that. I don't know if it's the same for you, Amy, as well.
Email or calling would be fine either way.
And then how competitive is this grant? So it depends. We'll see how many applications we get in. I mean, the past couple rounds, we've gotten way more applications than we've been able to fund. But at the same time, we don't know until the actual deadline comes how many different proposals will come in. Some of the things we talked about, relatively speaking, priority-wise, that there are certain areas that we talked about, some that all else being equal, we've targeted for investments. The other thing that I'd say around the competitiveness of it is that something that Amy mentioned before too, we would favor collaborative proposals as well over others. So if it's just, we absolutely will and have funded proposals that my organization wants to do this new program, and we funded those. But the ones that are better, that hey, I've talked to this other organization, and between the two of us, we're going to do something together. That's even better. So, are there any other comments on these or others that have come into you so far, Amy? So, okay, Liz, we'll just open it up then for open.
For those of us who have gone through the HungerFree, is even if we're submitting our reports early back, should we get our reports done and our outcomes for what we have accomplished before? Would that be beneficial, or doesn't that really matter?
No, we hope you can report on the regular reporting schedule we have, and we wouldn't necessarily I'm trying to think if there's a situation where if it's germane to the extent that the new idea is relative to, okay, we did this and now we're going to go do that, it would be helpful, but I wouldn't stipulate that as a sort of must-do. Got it. Okay. What other questions, if any? And now we can say Tom's still here too, so if somebody thinks of a technical question as well, this is open question now for anybody who's on the line as well. Of any and all type, we'll take it. We've got about 20 minutes or so left now.
Is the missing meal gap data also includes age?
Yes, but not to a really specific level. So we have meal gap, and we can tell you in a specific census tract how many people are above age 65 or below age 5 or something like that. The model we have does not tell you how many, for instance, under or over 65 are below 200% of poverty. We've since gotten that information, but it's not built into the model. I can give it to you, though, and you could be able to say, okay, I'm looking at this town or this county or this neighborhood, and I can see that the food insecurity rate looked to be a certain amount, and I also want to know how many people there are above age 65 or whatever your chosen age group is. That data actually, the Census Bureau released it a few months ago, and I can provide that to you if you'd like to have it.
Hi, David. A couple of questions. One, can we release or publish on our website the close-up report?
I'm not sure what you mean by close-up report, but I think yes. I mean, generally speaking, yeah. The information, if there's information that we give, and you want to say, hey, in my community, according to HungerFree Minnesota in 2010, there were 7,034 food insecurity. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. My second question is, what type of impact are you hoping to see in the proposals? Like, is there a certain % of meals? Are you looking for a 50% gap closure, 10%?
That's a great question. And before we thought about that as a criteria, some of you might have even heard that in the first round. We did a sort of evaluating the kind of return on investment, the ROI, how many can be reached. But, one of the things we discovered through a lot of the proposals that have been sent in is it was really hard to pick. I mean, of course, bigger is better, but at the same time, one of the purposes of doing this is to help people, especially in a way to foster collaboration, understand a little bit better sort of what your impact is. So if you think that, wow, my program or my new idea is only going to amount to 10% of the meal gap or something, should I even bother with this? Yes, please do. I mean, it's nice to look at the bigger scopes that we get are better, but also it's harder to accomplish, right? So anytime, I mean, if you can put together something that seems like a solid way that is going to target specifically a particular group, there's not like some specific cutoff or line that only proposals that will have 20% greater impact or something will be considered. We don't look at it that way.
And you may be serving an underserved population that will certainly take in consideration, like seniors or whatnot.
Is there a Word or a PDF version of the application that we can take a look at, or do we just need to copy it off of the website if we want to do a...
Okay, so we can make a PDF copy, and we'll make sure we include that on the online application. There'll be attachments to the grant guide for the grant guidelines. Let's see, I'm trying to think what we're going to have there. So we'll have grant guidelines, we'll have PDF for the application, and there may be one other document. Copy of the PowerPoint. Yes, that's what the other one was. Yep.
Is there an ultimate hope here that people, the missing meal or the meal gap here is that we're going to at least hope that folks will have access to having meals in their own home, blah, 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 hoping that we're going to get them on SNAP or in some of the federal programs. I'm SNAP outreach, so I'm shamelessly plugging here. So is that the hope here? Is that we're going to be that people are going to be partnering up with SNAP outreach programs, that kind of stuff like that?
Well, so the screening of federal programs is a requirement of the grant, but what we mean by reducing or eventually reducing the missing meal gap or ending the meal gap is what you just described, is ensuring that people will have access to food, free food and nutritious food preferably, but it's really about having access and knowing where they need to go to ensure that they don't go to bed hungry.
Yeah. And I would add to that, if it's relevant to people, that if you're not using Bridge to Benefits today or something, it doesn't mean you can't apply. It's just one of the things that we want you to do as part of this process, if you're not doing it already, is start to screen people for other programs. So that's one clarification. The broader point that you illustrated makes sense is that one of the things we know is if you look at the size of a meal gap in an area, typically speaking, if you really wanted to get it done, it's going to take a multifaceted approach, right? So, a local food shelf could do, a massive expansion or something probably, and it still probably isn't going to come up. At the same time, if we only try to enroll people in SNAP, that's not going to catch everybody either. There's lots of different levers to pull, and that's one of the purposes of this is to, and so it doesn't mean that either that we, we're not necessarily favoring one over the other. We tend to work a lot with food shelves and others, but we funded proposals that are specifically focused on SNAP outreach or that are focused on helping, connect people with school meals or something like that. So we want to think as broadly as we can.
Yep. Bottom line, just want to make sure of this, that we need to be expanding what we're doing and not maintenance of effort.
Correct. Exactly. Very well put. And it doesn't stipulate this here, but this has come up many times before. We will not fund just more money for food. So your proposal, if some of the money would go towards, sort of priming the pump with food for your new program, that's okay. But if you just say, I want $10,000 because I'm going to buy $10,000 of food with it, and that's going to serve X more meals, that won't be funded. We're looking at capacity building funds and not just general ops kind of thing.
And that's actually in the grant guidelines that, and the other piece of in the grant guidelines that was asked on the webinar, or one of the webinar participants, was can you use it for bricks and mortar if you want to build a new building? And we're not funding bricks and mortar. However, if you need to renovate your space to basically fit in a walk-in cooler or freezer, that is okay, but we're not. So
capital campaign contributions, for instance, we won't fund. If you say, hey, we've got a capital campaign going on, but if you've got, we've expanded our space and we need to build new coolers in it, or I need a new truck or something like that, that's fair game. Yep.
Yeah, the second question. I'm with VOA America, Minnesota, and we have an awful lot of eating stations around this area, metro area. And one of our sites is Southwest Senior Center. And we were told by the health department or whoever regulates kitchens that we had to install a new vent hood in order to stay in business by October 1st. And we're trying very hard to see where that money can come from. Is that vent hood and installation anything that you would consider to stay in business at the center?
Well, all right, so I don't want to make the grant decision, publicly judge that one right here. And just so you know, that, I mean, we have both between HungerFree, we have a committee of people that review applications as well, and we look at them both by themselves, but also in the context of other programs that we get. So it's one that that's kind of a gray area between this sort of general ops and is it better to keep 10,000 meals from going away versus being 10,000 new ones?
Exactly.
But at the same time, it is when we think about sort of innovation, collaboration, the other things we're trying to fund. I'm not going to say that categorically don't bother, but I would rather see that as part of something that is a broader strategy that, okay, our Southwest Senior Center draws people from this area. We know there's this many people we're trying to reach, and these are the kinds of things that can be done to do it. And if one of those things includes that we got to keep the kitchen open, but that's one of 3 or 4 tactics that are part of how we're going to serve 1,000 more seniors that live in this part of the county or something. I would much rather see a proposal that comes like that versus saying our kitchen's about to get blacklisted and we're going to have to pull the plug. Save us.
So if we expanded the scope of the project by outreach into that area, plus the kitchen hood.
Yeah. So just only one more on this, and we'll see if there's other questions. Again, I would say start with the meal gap and go backwards is the way that I would prefer to see programs. So we get applications, and it's not a question that, hey, we're already doing this, and I want to do some more. But what I really prefer to see is that we've identified this group of people that are food insecure, and we want to, we're reaching some of them. We want to reach more, and kind of backwards about the way we're going to do it. Our strategy or our plan involves, these 2 or 3 or 4 things that are part of our package that's going to allow us to reach X many more people or serve X many more meals. That's kind of the way I would do it.
And I would encourage, if you guys have similar questions to what he's posing, call us individually. If
Yeah.
you're serving the 9-county area, you can call me. If you're serving Greater Minnesota, you can call David. Okay?
You missed the September 20th deadline, but you should contact Open Your Heart to the Hungry and Homeless. They'll do it. They'll put the hood on.
No. Yeah.
Will you fund partial grants? So if somebody submits an implementation grant for $50,000, would you ever come back and say, we'll give you half of that, or are you only funding what is asked for?
Yes, so we would do that. Sometimes we might come back with a potential offer that's less than what you actually requested. Likewise, it's okay to apply for, hey, I've got a $60,000 idea, you know, and we're going to get $20,000 from this other source and need $40,000 from you, or whatever the case may be. That's all right to do.
Yeah, it's really going to be dependent on the number of proposals we have coming in and
right.
the total grant requests coming in.
Any other questions online? Anybody coming in from the webinar? Anybody who's out there in cyberspace, don't hesitate to send in a question if you've got one. Others from here in the room?
So if we're wanting to put like a fridge or freezer system in our shelf, are you wanting anything written out of like a bid that we can get from someone of how much it's going to cost as part of the application? If we're asking for a certain amount of money,
we just need to know. We just need to know how much the cost would be, and just specified in the program budget under supplies equipment.
What's much more important in that kind of case, though, is I want to know what's going to be the impact of what you're doing with it. You know, because of the new refrigeration equipment, we can start serving perishables, which we weren't able to do, and we think we could serve this much of it during the course of the year. That's much more important in my mind about how those, and not so much that you got the absolute lowest bid or something like that. So, other questions?
Well, thank you all so much for being here. You know you can reach out to David and Amy subsequent to this meeting. You will be getting emails with the online information. Everything will be on the website, HungerFree Minnesota, Greater Twin Cities. Thank you, Greater Twin Cities United Way. Again, thank you so much for being here. We really look forward to the proposals that move forward, and we wish you the best of luck. And again, we're here to help. Thank you.